Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bazaar Over Explained. I'm the Bazaar Whisperer and we are in season 2 here of the Bazaar. It's very exciting. The Bazaar blooms, so now we have 27 days here remaining to hit legend ranked, and let's see what all of this means here. In this episode, I'm going to go over all the new changes in the latest patch, including the patch notes, what rewards we're going to be looking for, the new items that are going to be available to our different characters, and everything under the sun that is to do with the Bazaar. So, first and foremost, we have a new prize pass. So the prize pass is going to work in the same way that the previous prize pass did. We're earning experience through daily challenges. We're getting weekly challenges that earn us even more. If we subscribe, we obviously get even more XP. And then we are working up our way across this tracker here for our experience in the pass, and we're going to be able to unlock different expansions. We're going to be able to also unlock different rugs, and then if we can reach our level 60, we are going to get this Spring Festival Vanessa, which is the skin that is the face of the patch. So again, we've got about a month to do that. And additionally here, we can also see that if we are subscribed, we have a new card pack, or card back rather. It's this botanist, which is kind of cool. So just a little thing here for your people who are subscribing, you'll be having an access to this. Additionally, our ranks have been reset, so we are all at bronze, and this will matter a little more as we talk about the ranks and how they are changing and how we level up. It's not too big, but it is something to take note of. What I've clicked on here is the daily special. So we've seen the daily special before. If you go down and click that Bazaar button, we'll have a certain amount of hours to get specific rewards here, which are changed every single day. Today I have access to the wishing fountain, but notably here we can also pay now real money for the item instead of the in-game currency. And I want to point out that if we're purchasing this item, if we used the in-game currency, every piece of currency, every gem is essentially worth 1 cent. So it's a very easy transaction, or I guess easy comparison to make. We know that 3,000 gems would be 30 US dollars. However, if we are purchasing the item outright, it's actually a bit cheaper. It's $10 and not $30. I think that this is overall a good change. I personally think that with the last patch, what they did with their itemizing or their pricing of their new system and how they monetize, they really changed things out in a very positive way, in where we are not having to spend nearly as much money to get the things that we want in the game. And then if we want like special cool cosmetics, we can purchase those, but these cosmetics can be purchased for looks like a third of the price of what they would ultimately be going for if you put gems into the game. And again, if we want to purchase gems, there's always this button to do so. We can see that, yeah, 500 gems is $5. So another change here is to the weekly special, which before in season 1, this was always here as kind of like it's coming down the pipeline sort of deal, and now it's officially a thing. So we have a week to unlock this skin. It's a bit more expensive, as we can see here. You can spend gems or purchase it with real dollars. So if you want this Pygmalien skin, and I imagine there'll be some other legendary skins coming down the road, you can do so here. Jumping back to the prize pass for a second, we can also see that the chests are different now. So we can view the chest details here. This will give you a breakdown of what percentage chance you have to actually get any of the consumables, or rather not the consumables, but the different skins and things of this nature, the different tiers, the collectibles. That's a better word for it. You also could get bonus rewards and that sort of stuff. Pretty similar, if not the exact same as it was before. But if we view this collectibles list, we can also see that there are some cool items for us to collect. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 different skins that we can unlock through chests. We have a new board that is legendary, which is, a 0.24% drop rate. So you'd have to open many chests to potentially get a legendary item, but there is a new board that you can get. There's new rugs, there's new music, card pack, stash bank, and a whole host of these different card alterations, I shall say. So this is what we'll be getting in our chests here, and then again we can get ranked vouchers in chests. But with all this, let's jump into the patch notes themselves. So I believe official patch notes are still on the way, but in the meantime, I've pulled up Mobalytics. One thing to know about this is that this is, again, not the official patch notes, but it is essentially what I believe is like kind of like the data mine patch notes, so they can see what changes are there. This is, from what I can gather from past patches, like 99% accurate. There may be certain things that we just did not see, that Tempo wants us to know about in their official patch notes, but we can generally see that these are going to be pretty accurate. I would just say that, if there's a couple things that you might want to check in on the official patch notes if you want to see everything that's going to be coming out in this season 2 patch. And at this time of recording, they are not out yet, but I am certain, or I guess pretty confident, that they'll be on the way. Regardless, let's look at the new patch. So we have 2 new expansions, one for Mak, and we have one for Pygmalien. So 10 new items for Mak, 10 new items for Pygmalien. We can see that this is unlocked through the prize pass at tier 15 and tier 30 respectively. Additionally, Dooley's Dualtron expansion and the gang expansion that were available in the last patch in Season 1 are now unlocked for all players, so no need to purchase them. You'll have those available to you, and we can look at that here. So if you did not purchase them before, you can go to the character and see Vanessa, go over to your expansion, and you'll see that the expansions should be unlocked for you, and thus you'll have access to all these new items. So that's pretty fun. And with that, we can also, while we're here, look at the new items for each of the characters. So notably on this prize pass here, we normally have to unlock going up to level 15 through experience points to be able to access this expansion. But we can also skip 15 tiers by paying $10, and then we can go directly to the Mak expansion, which is this Dangerous Experiments. And I did a video on these new items, but let's just check them out one more time here. So we have, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 new items for Mak. We can unlock it within the prize pass, and we can purchase it for 3,000 gems. And again, like all the other expansions, it automatically unlocks for all players when the current season ends. Notably as well, if you are playing in this patch and you don't unlock this pack, you're still going to be playing against other people who have. So it's not like this will just completely be barred from your experience. If you are going to be facing against Maks in the Bazaar, then they are likely to have this expansion if they purchased it. So it doesn't affect your opponents, I should say. But either way, let's go through the items here real quick. I, again, had a video that I'll put up on the screen here that you can click on where I go a little bit more in depth into each item, but for the purposes of this video, we see the first one here is the Wild Quillback. It says it's a medium item, it's a friend, which is good for Mak. It doesn't have too many of those. When a player uses a weapon, poison that player for 3, and when you use a non-weapon item, gain 3 regeneration. So this ultimately means that we are kind of going to this different realm of synergy here where we are self-poisoning. The Wild Quillback also reminds me of maybe even something like a beehive, which charges your bees when an enemy uses a weapon. So kind of similar effect. I think this can be a pretty interesting item here, and it'll be one that I am curious to see how people incorporate into their runs. But let's keep going. So we have Infuse Bracers. It starts at gold tier. It's a 5-second cooldown. It says poison both players for 5. So we see again this new synergy where we are poisoning both players, not just our opponents. And it says when you poison yourself, weapons gain plus damage for the fight equal to 1 times the amount poisoned. And the weapon to the left of this has lifesteal. I've actually pulled this up in howbazaar.gg for us to take a little bit closer look at with the stats on it. And I'll go back for the Quillback too. I think that'll be probably good practice for us. So when we look at the Infused Bracers, again, it starts at gold, and it says when you poison yourself, you gain that much damage. And because it's starting at gold tier, we can only upgrade it to diamond. And then when we're at diamond, it gains 2 times the amount of damage for the amount that was poisoned. So it's a pretty interesting scaling there. Notably, also the weapon to the left of this has lifesteal, which I think is pretty cool. And why don't we look at the Quillback while we're here? Quillback, Wild Quillback. So it's going to go 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5 on your poison and regen. Okay, so it doesn't do a terribly large amount of poisoning and regen, but it could still do a pretty large amount if we have the right setup on either our board or our opponent's board. And I like the visuals. I like the visuals and the way this looks, so I jump back here. The next item here is the Adrenal Converter. So it's going to poison both players for 5, and it says when you poison yourself, gain 10 regen for the fight and haste 1 item for 2 seconds. So I think this can be really cool. It's going to offset the poisoning that you're doing to yourself, and it's actually going to be giving you basically +5 regen for every time you poison yourself. So you're offsetting that poison and you're also gaining a benefit. I think that this is one of those staple items here that's going to be great in this archetype. It also helps enable the regen archetype, and hasting other items on Mak is very good. Mak kind of has like a startup problem where he doesn't really get going too quickly unless you have something that can help jumpstart that. I'm thinking like a haste potion, but I'm also thinking about an item like pendulums, scales, or hourglass. These items that lower cooldown or charge items. And I think that ultimately hasting items on Mak is pretty good. And really the interesting thing here is that when you poison yourself clause is separate from the actual cooldown of the item. So this is going to see any item that poisons you, you're going to get that 10 regeneration, and you're also going to haste that item for 2 seconds. So kind of similar, even makes me think of something like the Ouroboros statue, which gives you regeneration every time you poison. So I think that this could be pretty strong. I'm going to just pull it up here in bazaar.gg just to see how it scales, and looks like it's 5, 10, 15 for how it scales when you're poisoning both players, and then we gain 15 and 20 regen. Interesting. So every time essentially we're just going +5 regen when we poison ourselves. The haste does not get affected when you level it up, so that's pretty good to know. But why don't we also go back and see some other items here. We see the Venomous Dose, which poisons both players for 2, and we gain regen for the fight equal to this item's poison. So this is kind of negating itself in its own right. We're poisoning ourselves for 2, but we're also gaining 2 regen. So it's kind of like a self-poison enabler. I think that's going to work really well with some of these other items here that see that poisoning yourself trigger, like the Adrenal Converter. This Venomous Dose is going to be like the kind of glue that holds that together. The next item here is Rapid Injection System. It says when you poison yourself, poison 4. And then it also has another clause here that says when you use an adjacent item, poison yourself for 4 and gain 2 regeneration for the fight. It's also a tool in a medium item. It has no cooldown. So this is a static effect that's going to be on your board. And it is going to, again, enable that self-poison synergy, but it also comes at a detriment. It's only giving you 2 regeneration for every 4 that you put on yourself. So essentially you're giving yourself +2 poison. So there is a downside to this rapid injection system, but it's also putting 4 poison onto your opponent. So it can do some crazy things. How you balance that is going to be up to you, I suppose. We'll see how that works. The next item here is the Peace Rot, which looks to be starting at bronze here, and I'll pull it up in bazaar.gg in a second to see how it scales, because I think that's going to be interesting. But it's a medium item. It's a property, which is, there's not too many of those on Mak, so a medium property is pretty cool to have. It has a 7-second cooldown, says gain 2 regeneration for the fight, but it has this really interesting clause. It says when you visit a merchant, permanently destroy the item to the left of this to increase this item's regen value, or increase this item's regen by its value. So why don't we pull that up in bazaar.gg, and we can see how it scales here. So it's going to not gain any more value from what you destroy, but it's going to gain a lower cooldown. So it reminds me of something like an Orange Julian. I think that this item, and I talked about it in my other video, can be pretty good. Ultimately, we'll see how good it's going to be. I'm really interested to see how this clause works when it says permanently destroy the item to the left of this, and it to increase this item's regen by its value. I'm wondering if we are increasing the Peace Rot's value by itself, or if we're increasing the Peace Rot's value by the item that we destroyed. If we're increasing Peace Rot's value by itself, then essentially we're doubling its value every time that we are destroying another weapon, which could be pretty interesting. I think if that is the case, and this item is super strong, if we are permanently destroying the item to the left of this to increase its regen by its value, and we're just gaining like 1 or 2 value every time we do that, that's certainly less powerful, but we've seen that weapons, or rather items in general on Mak, that can give Mak a huge burst of regen, can synergize really well with something like Staff of the Moose, which gives your weapons damage equal to your regen, and there's other cool items that work similarly. So excited for that. The next big item here is Test Subject Alpha. So notably it has a 10-second cooldown, deals 50 damage, so that's interesting. That's been changed since when it was spoiled. I believe it was at 11 seconds before, so now it's lowered to 10. This is a large item. It's going to deal 50 damage at every 10 seconds, but it also has these other two clauses here that are very important. It says, when you use an adjacent item, poison both players for 10. And it also has another separate clause here that says, when you poison, this gains plus damage for the fight equal to the amount poisoned. So, notably on one of my other videos, so we see this person here, Daryl Osborne 7578. So shout outs to you, has this great catch here where they say, I think that a number of the Mak poison both player items will trigger when you poison, or trigger that effect twice. So when you poison, that's going to go off 2 times there. And this is really interesting with an item like Test Subject Alpha, which says when you use an adjacent item, poison both players for 10. So presumably, if what they were saying is correct, that means that we have 2 triggers of this poisoning, so we're going to get plus 20 damage every time you use an adjacent item, which makes Test Subject Alpha way, way more scary. I think that ultimately the other kind of downside to this item is that it is super slow. So if we were unable to get this off when we have all this poison that we've done to ourselves, and notably our opponents are going to be attacking us too, we kind of need this Test Subject Alpha to one-shot our opponents. It's rather unlikely that if we build around this item that we are going to be able to survive all that self-poisoning that we're going to be doing. We are, again, maybe able to utilize this in a way where we're poisoning out our opponent before it would even matter if Test Subject Alpha went off, and maybe like Test Subject Alpha is our backup plan, because we can get a lot of fast items that we put adjacent to this, but the fact that it's also hurting us is a big downside, especially with Mak has the highest HP pool out of all the heroes, but we'll see that that has changed too, so pretty exciting there. But yeah, I think the Test Subject Alpha is a really cool item. It's a really cool design, and it'll take some working with it to ensure that it actually goes off and is effective for us and not for our opponents. The other item here is the fungal spores. So it's a small item, and it says every 5 seconds your poison items gain +2 poison for the fight. I've again talked about it before, but I think that this is going to be super, super strong. Pulling it up into howbazaar.gg, we can see that also it's going to start at bronze, and then when we level it up, it's going to give us +1 more poison for every time we utilize this. You know, I think the fungal spores in itself has like a 5-second cooldown here, so it's generally going to happen either exactly when or a little bit before your other poison item goes off. So generally it's going to buff your whole board's poison, and then itself is going to go off. Which I think is really powerful. So it's kind of like if you look at something compared to like the Emerald, there we go. This says your other items, poison items have +3, 4, 5, 6 poison. So pretty similar effect, minus like 1 poison at the start of the fight, but then also it scales, which is pretty cool. So I think fungal spores is going to be a pretty big player here in the new meta. And next item here is kind of I want to say one of the larger payoffs for all of this. It is the Barbed Claws. This is a 5-second cooldown item. It deals 5 damage, and it has +1 multicast for each player who has poison on them. So this will ideally have +2 multicast on it, so it'll go off 3 times, and thus it'll be doing at its base 15 damage to our opponents. You know, this is a silver tier frame, but I think that's inaccurate. Yeah, that is inaccurate here. Just again going to howbazaar.gg. So the Barbed Claws at silver tier will be doing 10 damage and not 5 damage. But also it scales really nicely here. So it goes 5, 10, 20, and then it goes to 40. So if we can get our Barbed Claws to diamond tier on Mak, it's going to be doing 120 damage every 5 seconds at its base, which is pretty good. And also if we can get any sort of enchantment effect on it, a 3 times multicast item is just very powerful to have. So I think that this Barbed Claws is going to be Really nice again for Mak in the new patch, especially synergizing with all these other items. If we can use it with like an infused bracers, this barb claws is going to go crazy. So I think that's a really cool item. And then we have this last item here, the optical augment, which says at the start of each fight, poison yourself for 4. And it also says the item to the left of this has crit chance equal to your poison. So I think it would be pretty easily with the optical augment and with all these self-poisoning items to get this to a pretty high value. Again, it's risky when we're putting ourselves like at 100 poison because we're going to be taking 100 damage a second. However, we're also putting 100% crit chance on another one of our items, and it's not like we need to get 100% crit chance. Just introducing at least 1 point of crit onto our items can be all that we need to crit. So I think the optical augment can be pretty strong. Additionally, it's going to start that poison yourself trigger, which would be pretty important for jumpstarting some of these other self-poison seeing items. So I think that this could be pretty cool. And yeah, I'm overall pretty excited about this. And let's just pull this up in howbazaar.gg for a second. My mind's just theory crafting about test subject alpha. So I wanted to see how it scales. And it says when you use an adjacent poison item, both players get 10, 20, 30 poison. So that's that's a lot of poison. But also its cooldown gets reduced, which I think is the really big thing here. If you can get a test subject alpha to diamond tier, I think this thing is going to be absolutely insane. Going off every 6 seconds at that point when you're poisoning so frequently, I think it's going to be really, really cool. And you're putting, potentially plus 60 damage on it. So yeah, anyway, I think that's going to be very strong. So 10 new items on Mak. I think that these are going to be really fun. I like that this is the tier 15, so it's going to be the first expansion that we can unlock. So if you're doing it kind of the good old-fashioned way, and the way that I'll probably be doing it is you're going to work up to it where you are getting to level 15, and then you can unlock these items here. But now let's look at the new Pygmalien items. So investment opportunities unlocks at level 30. Let's take a look at these. Again, had another video where I went over most of these, but not all of them. So let's take a look at these new items. So the first one here is Showcase. It is a 5-second cooldown property, which is very notable. It's always great when we can get another property on Pygmalien. A medium property at that. It says on a 5-second cooldown, if you have 3 or more weapons, they gain plus 20 damage for the fight. And if you have 3 or more shield items, they gain plus 20 shields for the fight. So I think that this item is a pretty interesting one. There are a lot of shield items and weapons on Pygmalien that kind of need another item to make them good. They're very weak in their own right. I can think of something even like a Halidai, which has +2 multicast, and if we can get more damage on this, that's great. I'm also thinking about, again, something like a Yo-Yo, which has 1 damage, but if we can crank that damage value up, that's going to be very good. So overall, I think that this Showcase could be very strong. I also think that if it scales nicely, could be something to help us out into the mid game here. So it's nice that it starts at bronze. This kind of adds a 3rd bronze item that helps scale our board in the early game. Normally in Pygmalien, you're pretty reliant on a Ganjo, or you're pretty reliant on weights to do that. But now with a Showcase, we have a 3rd one we can get. There's a 4th one in Apropos Chapeau, but that starts at silver and it requires other items on board. So it's kind of like not an out-of-the-box enabler. However, if this is giving our board plus 50 damage or plus 50 shield, or if we can even capitalize off both, I think that the Showcase can be really strong. The nice thing about it is that it's not like the Ganjo, which only works on adjacent items. So it says adjacent items gain whatever value it might be. It has that static clause where it just says all of your weapons gain that much damage. And again, if we're utilizing something that can capitalize off both parts of this trigger, every 5 seconds, let's say we have 3 weapons and 3 shields, we are adding at level 1 120 stats to our board every 5 seconds. That's insane. That's crazy. I mean, you're ideally going to be, I guess, enabling this on day 3 where you'd be able to do that, because that's where you would have that full board. But regardless, just if you can get a showcase and 3 other weapons in the early game, or 3 other shield items in the early game, that's going to be super strong. So I really like the showcase here. I think that this is going to be a really awesome item for us. But let's look at the other items. So we also have the Rice Baller. It's a 7-second cooldown item that burns 5. And it says this has +1 multicast for each item you have in play with value over 10. We'll see that this is going to be a little easier to enable with some of the other items that are in this Pygmalien set. But the initial take here is that burn is very strong. And if we can burn and have a lot of burn on a 7-second cooldown, that can work really, really nicely for us. The problem is, again, we have to get our value of our other items over 10, and that is not a trivial task to do, but I think that warrants us to just jump straight into the item that can help us do that, which is Pen FT. So, 2-second cooldown says your items gain +3 value for the fight. That's crazy. That's, in my opinion, maybe I'm crazy, but I think that if we're adding +3 value to all of our other items for the fight and enabling a Rice Baller, or if we're just putting it on our value stack items, a 2-second cooldown item that does that is going to work very effectively. Essentially, we can look at this as kind of like a 1-2 combo in some ways, where we get our Rice Baller, and then we put a Pen FT on board, and that's 3 slots on board. We have 7 other slots. If we put 7 small items there, then when the Rice Baller goes off, because the Pen FT itself is going to go off 3 times by then, it's going to give +9 value to the other items for that fight, so they're all going to be at +10 value. Our Rice Baller is going to get +8 multicast. It's because it has +1 multicast for each item you have in play with volume over 10. Oh, actually, it's going to gain, does the Pen FT do it for the other items? Yeah, okay, it's actually going to gain +9 multicast. So the Rice Baller with Pen FT, I think, is going to be a really good combo. And then, yeah, putting 45 burn on our opponent every 7 seconds in the early game is going to feel really good. Other ways to enable this, we also could put more value on our board with different items, like value stacking items. If we're trying to put on, like, I don't know, a little more value through a rewards card onto a medium or a large item, we can put our value stack item on board, and maybe this Rice Baller will be kind of effective at like a +2 or 3 multicast. But I don't know, I think it's really kind of like, if you get these 2, that's going to feel really good. Regardless, let's keep moving. There's many more things to talk about. There's the Speedrunner here, which says on a 6-second cooldown, it's a small item. It's going to charge 1 non-toy item for 1 second, and it says when you use another toy, charge this 1 second. So this is a hard one to gauge. It has that static clause that says when you use another toy, charge this 1 second, and we can pair it with something like a yo-yo, which is a toy and is going to be going off very frequently because that's what a yo-yo does. And thus the Speedrunner charging 1 non-toy item, I guess, could help enable our yo-yo. If we could also put a yo-yo next to this, I think that could be very good, because they could be going off in tandem. That'd be one I have to see play out in front of me, but regardless, I want to pull up the scaling on it. Okay, so it stays at 6 seconds, but it charges more. So I think that's pretty interesting. It reminds me of something like Piggles, but I don't know. I'm unsure about this one. I think that it could be strong, but my initial take is that the enabling for it, I just have to see it work before I can fully commit to saying that it's strong. But regardless, nice new item to have. And then keep moving here, the Bad Blocker, which has a similar clause to this Rice Baller. It has an 8-second cooldown, shields for 20. It's a small item that is tech and apparel, which is nice. It has a static clause here that says this has +1 multicast for each item you have in play with value over 10. So same as the Rice Baller here. I like the Bad Blocker less though. The Rice Baller itself is much more proactive, which feels really good with the amount of burn that I can do. And the Bad Blocker is at an 8-second cooldown to shield 20. On rate, that's pretty bad for Pygmalien, thinking about like a fixer-upper, which it maybe is an unfair comparison just because of how much shielding it can do in totality. But if you have the bad blocker and you have the pen FT, you can do a lot of shielding at 8 seconds, and I think that is something that you will want to look for. But without the pen FT, it's probably not powerful enough as a standalone item. So unsure about that. And let's just see if that cooldown gets reduced. So bad blocker. Nope, just gains more shielding. Okay. I mean, 60 shielding times 9 or something like that feels good, but I think that is maybe not where you want to be. Shielding in its own right is not the most powerful effect right now, and we'll see in the patch notes that it got a little bit better, but regardless, let's keep moving and look at some other items here. So the next item is Hypergreens, 4-second cooldown. It says adjacent items gain +3 value for the fight. It also says when you use an adjacent item, heal equal to the value of adjacent items. So Hypergreens, that's a pretty interesting clause there. It adds healing to our board. It can also enable our value stack items to be pretty good. I think about this alongside something like a Kiowas. The Hypergreens is going to go off, and Kiowas got nerfed. Spoilers for everyone. It's going to go off at 8 seconds now, so the Hypergreens will have increased its value by 6 at that point. And that could be really strong. I also think about if we're just putting this and we're not next to our value stack item and we're not even worrying about that 4-second adjacent items gain +3 value ability. If we're just saying for every item that is adjacent to this, we're healing equal to the value of adjacent items, we're kind of like giving lifesteal to our value stacked items, which is kind of insane. Thinking about if we're putting this next to, again, a fixer-upper, that feels pretty good because every time the fixer-upper goes off, it's going to be shielding for a lot, and thus we're going to be also gaining a lot of healing for that. But again, really, I see this like pairing with a Kiowas, which I think could be really strong. Or Kiowas goes off, burns for 200, or also then in turn going to be healing for 200. I think that's pretty strong. So yeah, Hypergreens I think is an interesting item. It doesn't really help too much in the early game, I don't think. And let's see if it starts at bronze tier. So Hypergreens. Okay, so it starts at silver tier, so you can't get it super early. Giving +9 value to the items to the right and left of this for the fight is pretty good, but getting it to diamond tier is probably not where you want to be. Although it does have a 4-second cooldown, which feels good, so yeah, not super sold on this one being very strong, but I think that it has the opportunity to put a lot of healing on our board, which is very good, as we'll see with some healing changes in the new patch. Another item here is 28-hour fitness. It says when you use a weapon, your items with shield gain 10 shield for the fight. It says when you shield an item, or when you use a shield item, your weapons gain +10 damage for the fight, and it itself is a large property. So this could be really cool. I think about it also in terms of like the showcase, where we kind of want to have both shield items and damage items on our board, thinking like a Tusk Helm or something like that. This I think is really cool. It is kind of incentivizing us to play a new strategy on Pig where we are trying to get both shield and damage items on board in a way that I guess feels good, where they're working synergistically together. I think about this in terms of like an item, and where I talked about it in my last video, like if we have a yo-yo and a robe, whenever the yo-yo is going off, we're giving damage to or we're giving shielding to our robe. Whenever the robe's going off, we're giving damage to our yo-yo, and they both have reduced cooldown whenever an adjacent item is used, or they both get charged. So I think that this could work really well with that sort of build. I'm interested again to see the scaling. I think that that is going to be what is most interesting on it, but it is not showcase, it's 28-hour fitness. Okay, so starting at silver tier, we can't get it at bronze, but it goes 10, 20, 30 on both. Okay. Yeah, I think it could be good. I think enchanting it can be really strong. Having something like turbo on this, when you use a weapon or shield item, haste one item for 1 second. So basically it's just like whenever you use anything on your board, haste that item for 1 second. That seems insane. Additionally, having something like fiery, toxic, you can just turn this thing into a really potent damage dealer into the later game. That's super cool. So this is definitely kind of like a high value enchant target that I think is really nice in that if you're playing 28-hour fitness, I'm unsure how this is going to scale into the later portions of the game, but if you can utilize its scaling adjacent to one of these, or in addition to one of these really powerful enchantments, that could be really strong. I mean, giving this thing icy even would just be crazy, or heavy. It reminds me of something like the Jabalian Drum, which is hasting the item, a weapon, whenever it's used, and it's adding damage to your board. So, yeah, I think the 28-hour fitness could be the real deal. And then moving forward here, Pen FT, while we're here, why don't we just go to look at how it scales. So, okay. I'm kind of glad to see this, because I think that if it went 369, that would be sort of obscene, just for how much value it's putting on your items. But if you can get this thing to gold tier, I mean, putting 8 value onto your items every 4 seconds, or 12, probably 12 value onto your items every 6 seconds, which is sort of a lot of the breakpoints for Pygmalien, where his item goes off, or around the 5 to 7 second mark. I think that this could be really strong. But yeah, I'm super sold on Pen FT. This item seems incredible. If it's not incredible in practice, well, I don't know what I'm doing here as the Bazaar Whisperer. Anyway, moving forward, we see another item here on Pygmalien, the Coin Cure. So it's a medium tool. It says every 7 seconds, gain regen for the fight equal to 1 times this item's value. We'll check how that scales in a second. But it also has a static clause that says, when you win a fight with this in play, increase its value by 3. It also has another static clause, which is very important. It says, when you lose a fight, if this item is in play, permanently destroy it and gain gold equal to its value. So, a lot of things to think about here. First, I'm going to start with that bottom clause. So, we don't lose our value when this dies, which I think is very good. I think about something like a crystal bonsai, which if we put it on board, which we generally don't want to do in our PvP fights, if we do for some reason and lose a fight, we just lost all the value on that. That feels really bad. But this item, if we need to play it on our PvP fights as Pygmalien, this item feels a lot less bad, just because if we do lose, we still retain the value and get the gold from it, which feels nice. So it's kind of more like plays into that risk reward, but the risk is not nearly as bad as some of the other items that have a similar effect. That when you win a fight, with this in play, increase its value by 3, I think is pretty good. And that's where I think it'd be wise to look at how it scales. So at later tiers here, it starts at silver. It's going to get 369 value. So silver, it's going to gain +3, gold +6, diamond +9. I can't imagine us getting this to diamond, but you never know. But also gaining this clause here, regen equal to 1, 2, and 3 times its value. That's a lot of regen. That could be pretty significant. Also, if you're Mak, looking for this at like Pearl's dig site or a Pygmalion merchant opportunity that you get can be very cool, because I think that this could put on a really, really, really large amount of regen. I wouldn't really want to put an enchantment on it, just because there is the risk that we lose a fight and it's destroyed, but I think that the Coin Cure could be pretty cool. I think it's going to take a little bit to get going, and it may be something that we have to start playing only when it's at gold tier in our PvP fights, because I can't imagine a medium item on a 7-second cooldown giving us like 20 regen is going to be worth it. But if we're getting maybe upwards to like the triple digit mark on a 7-second cooldown, this item then becomes really strong. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think that this is looking like an economy item for me. Utilizing it maybe with something like the Pen FT or the Hyper Greens could be pretty cool. But I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I do like this as an addition to the pool, because it ultimately is just another way for us to gain more money on Pygmalion, and gaining more money is one way for us to achieve our victories. So Let's look at the last two items here. One of the last ones here is Wrist Warrior. Notably, it's a small weapon, tool, and apparel item, so it has a tool and apparel clause. It's good for a Beast of Burden. 5-second cooldown. It says adjacent items gain +5 shield for the fight. It also says when the item to the left of this shields deal 5 damage. Okay. It's a hard one to evaluate. It was hard for me to evaluate before. It's still hard for me to evaluate. I want to see how this thing scales. So let's look at that. The Wrist Warrior. So it says adjacent items gain 5, 10, 15, 20 shield for the fight. So then the other clause here, when the item to the left of the shields, deal 5, 10, 15, 20. I'm not sold on those numbers. I think if we can increase this damage on it, and it is a weapon. It is a weapon. So, oh, but I don't think that it has damage clause on it. That's interesting. What I'm trying to figure out right now is if the Wrist Warrior being a weapon would be able to receive damage buffs. And I think the answer is yes, because it itself is a weapon. And I didn't think about this before. It itself is a weapon. So if we look at strength, yeah, your weapons deal more damage. Okay. With that in mind, the Wrist Warrior could be pretty cool. It makes me want to play it alongside 28-hour fitness and Showcase. Showcase sees it as a weapon, and also 28-hour fitness sees it as a weapon. So that's pretty cool. If it didn't have the weapon type inherently, it'd be way worse. But because it does have that weapon type, it's actually getting scaled with our Showcase and our 28-hour fitness. So that's a really interesting thing to know. And I think that that means it could be very powerful. Yeah, 5 seconds. I'm not really caring so much about the adjacent items gaining more shielding. I'm really caring about this dealing damage. So we want to put it next to a item that has a low cooldown, that shields again. You can think of something like the robe, which is not a skill. The robe, which can have a pretty low cooldown and is going to be getting charged a lot. It means that the robe could be a very important part of our builds. It also means some item like jewelry, which jewelry, there you go. Yeah, jewelry, an item that I really don't like, actually becomes kind of viable because it's not really shielding for a lot, but it is a 4-second damage dealer, essentially, on Pygmalien, which Pygmalien, items can be really slow, so if we have the opportunity to have a pretty fast weapon on our board, that seems pretty strong too. I'm also just thinking that this will work well with Jabalian Drum as well. I don't think you want to play your drum builds now that I think about it. You just want to have as many weapons as possible. If you have another shielding weapon, this could go crazy, but it's kind of a high roll. Anyway, yeah, Wrist Warrior, I think it innately is not that powerful, but if you can buff up its damage, then this item gets very interesting. But let's move on to our last item here, the Ring King Gauntlets. So, small weapon, tech item. Every 5 seconds, we deal damage equal to 1 times our income. It has multicast 2, and while it's in play, you have +1 income. Interesting. Okay. Well, we gotta look at the scaling on that one. We gotta look at that. So Ring King Gauntlets. So yeah, this is what I was looking for. It starts at bronze, and you gain 1 times the damage equal to 1 times your income. But at silver and gold, we see that it goes to 2, 3, and then diamond tier 4 times that damage. Pygmalien really wants to stack up a lot of income. I'm thinking about the most income I've ever had, and maybe it's like in the 20s or something like that. So if we're saying like best case scenario, we have 20 income. I'm going to bump that down actually. Let's say a normal case scenario where we can get to like 12 or 14 income. Let's use 14. If we can get 14 income, then with our Ring King Gauntlets, let's see, we're doing 28, and then we are also doing 28, 56 damage on a 5-second cooldown. That doesn't seem worth it. But having the income gained on your board, I think, is worth it. So what I'm seeing from this item is it's kind of like a value play that you put on your board in the early to mid game so that you can gain additional income, and it does like a little bit of damage. If you can put some damage scaling on this, having it be a multicast 2 item at 5-second cooldown is very strong. Again, if we look at something similar like a Halidai, that's at 7 seconds that has multicast 2, or if we're looking at something like Brass Knuckles, that's 8 seconds and that item has double damage. So Ring King Gauntlets being an inherently 5-second cooldown multicast 2 damage item is good. It's the other scaling portions of it that I'm not so sold on. However, we also know that Pygmalien generally has like a lot of, not want to say unplayable, I don't want to say unplayable, but I will say pretty underrated stat wise items that need another enabler. And then another enabler is right here, 20-hour fitness, right here, showcase. So I think that just because Ring King Gauntlets have that 5-second cooldown, these could be very viable. And knowing that it's giving us plus income, I think that's also very strong. So knowing all that, Ring King Gauntlets are kind of like innocuous, but they may be one of the better small weapons that you can find on Pygmalion, which is kind of interesting. Huh. Alright, now that we crunch the numbers here, yeah, this Ring King Gauntlets is actually seeming pretty strong to me. It's not strong alone. It needs things to enable it to be strong, but we could figure that part out. I'm not too worried about that, just because we got some great enablers for that. Again, put it next to a Ganjo or something like that seems very good too. Cool. Wow. Okay. I'm really happy with these new Pygmalion items. I think that these could be really strong. I think they work well with Pygmalion's items already, and they may not look super powerful on their face outside of like Pen FT to me, but hey, that's just me. But I think that how they synergize with Pygmalion's items is really potent and effective. Yeah, I'm really excited to play with these items. Kind of unfortunate in that they are level 30 items, so have to put in $20 and then unlock them to be able to play them, but well, you know what, Tempo? You might have gotten my money here. I'm really excited for these new Pygmalion items. Okay, we've talked about the new items. We've talked about how we're getting those items, the prize pass and everything. Let's really dive into the patch notes themselves. There are some very big things to note here that are super, super important. The first one being Heal now cleanses 10% of burn and poison effects instead of removing 1 stack of each. This makes heal items way more potent. There was a problem in the game in Season 1. I say problem, but if you were a Mak enjoyer or a Dooley enjoyer, these were just features and not bugs, where burn and poison, there was really no way to offset it. You just get 200, 400 burn or poison on you. There's nothing you can do. You die immediately. Healing now counteracts this in a way that I think is very potent, and it makes healing items way stronger. It's less strong in the early game in that in the early game, if you healed one, you'd remove 1 stack of poison, which was pretty nice, but just having a single trigger of healing, cleansing 10% of the burn is pretty monumental, I would say. I'm really curious to see in the official patch notes if this is also somehow more specific in that we're removing a certain amount of percentage of burn or poison on us for the amount of healing that we gain. But the way that I'm reading this is ultimately that 1 heal takes off 10% of the poison and burn on you. I think that that is really strong. That honestly makes Pygmalion's survivability builds way more effective. I think that there was a common complaint where people were frustrated that Season 1 compared to Season 0 or the beta, you in Season 1 could not play healing builds. You couldn't really play survival builds in general. I think that this also inadvertently buffs shield builds because if your opponent was able to just poison you straight through your shield, it didn't matter. So now we have this way to cleanse our burning and poisoning, which is really strong. I think that this inherently buffs Pygmalien a lot compared to the other heroes, just because that was one of the reasons why it was hard to play Pygmalien before. That and the weapons Vanessa builds that kind of just spammed a bunch of weapons and played Shark Claws. But yeah, I think that this is going to be a really good change. It may make Pygmalien too strong. Um, I hope not. I hope it keeps everything balanced. I think with some of the patch notes we'll see later too that Pygmalion didn't really receive a lot of straight up buffs number wise. So this healing now cleansing 10% of burn and poison I think is kind of the buff that I see to Pygmalion overall, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm very excited for that. But let's keep moving here. So we can also see that radiant enchantments have been removed from passive items, which is nice. So if you throw an item that just has passive effects into the random enchantment opportunity at level 10, or when you get your death trigger event, then it won't get radiant and won't just kind of be useless. So I think that's pretty good. Another piece here that I think is a good change overall. Mak now starts at 250 health. So Mak originally started with, I believe, 200 health. So this is a pretty nice change to Mak where he's going to be more effective in the early game. So I'm very excited for that. The store here, we've also seen that there's those weekly specials and daily specials. We talked about how they're purchasable. But here's a change to rank points that I think is important. And again, we'll see with clarity when the official patch notes come out if this works the way that I think it does. But rank points are now a bit different. Just slightly, but I think slightly in a really positive way. So if we get 0 to 3 wins, we're just going to get 0 points. And that's going to be the same at silver and gold and diamond tier. We'll talk about diamond tier in a second, actually. But if I'm reading this correctly, I'm seeing that we're not getting any degradation when we are losing or getting a 0 to 3 win run. Before, if you got 0 to 3 wins, you would lose a rank point instead of just getting 0 points. So again, if I'm reading this correctly, it's that we are not losing any points if we have a 0 to 3 run, which ultimately makes ranking up easier. That said, at bronze, silver, and gold tier, we see that at 4 to 6 wins, we're going to get 1 point, 7 to 9 wins are going to give us 2 points, 10 wins are going to get us 3 points. But at diamond tier, we are ultimately going from 0 to 6 wins gives us 0 points, 7 to 9 gives us 1 point, and 10 wins gives us 2 points. So previously, if we had 4 to 6 wins, we would get 1 point, and then if we got 7 to 10 wins, we would get 2 points. So now we have the opportunity to get 3 points, which I think is pretty nice here. That means that if you're getting your 10 wins on your runs, you're going to be ranking up really, really quickly. It's going to slow down a lot when you get to diamond tier. But again, what I really want to know, and I'll put out a post on it on YouTube when I find out the answer for rank points, is that if you get that 0 to 3 wins, do you lose a rank point? From what I'm reading right now, it looks like that is not the case. So, with that being said, getting 3 points if you get a 10 win is really cool for a person like me whose real goal every time that I'm in the Bazaar is to get to 10 wins. Getting a little extra boost for that 10 wins feels pretty good, not gonna lie. So I invite you to join me on the 10 win runs and prosper in the new meta of trying to get to 10 wins every single run and getting a maximum amount of points. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's also look at encounters. So I see this change to Mountain Pass, and I think that this is going to be secretly way important, way more important than it looks. So now when we go to the Mountain Pass, we don't have any options. We click it, and it triggers a random outcome upon selection. 25% of the time, it's going to give us a monster from the same day. 25% of the time, it's going to give us a monster for the next day. So we have essentially half of the time, or 50% of the time, 50% chance to get a monster fight. Then we also have a 40% chance for a positive outcome. I assume, I don't know, but I assume this means that we're also going to be able to get income, or we're going to be able to get an XP, or we're going to be able to get an item like we could before. We also have a 10% chance for a negative outcome, and I don't know what that is. Maybe that means we get nothing. Maybe that means something worse happens. We're going to have to wait for the official patch notes to see what that means, or just play it in our games to know. So right now, what I'm really seeing from this mountain pass is that we have a 50% chance to get a fight, which before we also, I don't know the percentages of it, we could get a fight before from the mountain pass. Regardless, we could get a guaranteed experience from this mountain pass event, which was rather important when we were trying to explicitly like maximize on the XP that we had, so that we would have more board space in the early game and more max HP compared to our opponents. So now it's way less consistent that we have that opportunity. Notably, we'll see that the tiny furry monster hasn't been changed, so at least that we see from these patch notes. So that means that you're still having that play pattern of you need, and I don't say, I say need, that's a little heavy-handed. You really want to have a food, a friend, or a toy in the early game so that you can gain 1 XP from the tiny furry monster. So at the end of day 2, you could level up another time and then have more board space than your opponent. That was a pretty common play pattern. That's still going to be here. We're also just going to have less opportunity, or at least less consistent opportunity, I shall say, to make up that 1 experience difference. Also with that, we see that there are some new encounters here. We have ones that are specific to apparel, and we have one that improves ammo items, which is pretty cool. Maybe making Vanessa ammo items a little more viable, but I imagine this Mad Maddie event will still be kind of rare. We have Deflect, which improves your shields. We have an improving of your health and regen items. We have improving of burn items, improving of poison items. Nothing here is indicating that these are specific to a hero, but if I had to guess, I would say that they probably are. I imagine that if you're Vanessa, you're only going to be able to get, or Mad Maddie's the only hero that will, Mad Maddie's the only encounter? No. Let me rephrase all of this. On Vanessa, that is the only place that you can get Mad Maddie. That's what I think. It wouldn't make too much sense if you could see this on the other characters, just because they don't have enough ammo items. I think about that with Deflect. I imagine that that is a Dooley specific encounter. Again, nothing in these patch notes would confirm that this is the case, but this is the assumption that I'm going to make just based off of the different improvement types. And if that is not the case, then that's still really cool. And it will hopefully feel really good when you have an ammo item and then you can upgrade it. But if you're playing like Pygmalien, you don't have a lot of ammo items, so we'll see. Regardless, we'll see how these play out. Just exciting to have new encounters, new ways to gain a lot of cool things on our items. So let's look at monsters. There's a lot of monster changes, as we will see, and I'm just going to point out, I think, the ones that you're going to need to know when you're going into the Bazaar. A lot of them have been changed, like little buffs with different items, or they gain different skills and that sort of stuff, or maybe they have more XP compared to where they were before, or more HP, but I'll let you read through the patch notes and you can see all those for yourself. But the big one here is that the Rogue Scrapper now is a day 2 fight. It's changed to silver tier, and in its place we see the Warrior is changed to gold tier. So our new gold fight that we have on day 2 that we will have to beat to maximize the amount of experience that we get, that plays into that level up early play pattern, is to defeat the Warrior. So the Warrior was tough before. It's honestly still a pretty tough fight, frankly. But yeah, it's now going to give you 4 gold. It's going to give you 3 experience. It has 400 HP, and we can actually just go. I don't think they've updated its placement. Okay, they have. Cool. So if we go to How Bazaar, we click on monsters, we can see where all the monsters are now. So the warrior does a lot of damage. It has a lot of shielding. Well, it has the frontal shielding skill, but that's on a Tusk Helm, which is a pretty high cooldown item. Regardless, this is going to be a tough fight. And instead of doing the math for the Rogue Scrapper, you're not going to have to do the math for the warrior. Honestly, I appreciate this change. I just generally, when I get to day 2, always am trying to fight the Rogue Scrapper. So now it's something new. I have to fight the warrior, and I think the warrior could be even a little more tough sometimes, depending on your build. So yeah, this is pretty interesting. I think also a nice addition to being your day 3 build is that the Rogue Scrapper had the Junkyard Club and had like the Gear Null and Repair Bot, so you had a damage, shielding, and healing item. But the warrior itself has a hatchet, which can give you some more value onto your items, which is kind of nice. And then it also has 2 opportunities for a damage improving item compared to the Rogue Scrapper, which only had 1. So yeah, not too big of changes here, but I think just good to know. Going back to the list of monsters here, we also can see again a lot of changes. Like Marianas is now at gold, Flame Juggler's diamond, so it's going to give you more XP than it did before. Prince Marianas is going to give you less. Gorgon Noble's been buffed. Trash Town Mayor's been buffed. Yeah, there's a lot of changes here. The other ones that I thought were pretty important were Volkos Enforcer is now a little easier to fight. So Volkos Enforcer before, if you had a freeze build and you were facing, could just kill you outright. So now Volkos Enforcer is a little easier, which is a really nice addition. As well as another one to look out for here is Property Baron is now at Diamond tier. So if we go back to the monsters here, we can see that it's no longer one of these 2 options. It's now been replaced by Lord of the Waste, essentially. Property Baron's now in the Diamond tier here. This is a pretty big change for Pygmalien. Pygmalien, when you're generally going to go into the late game, so you have a lot of opportunities to see the Property Baron, unless you had a lot of opportunities to get like Master Salesman, big numbers, or a nice value stacking payoff item or property payoff item. And now you have way less opportunity to do that. So that kind of like is an inherent nerf to the value stack builds or the property builds. So all of you players who don't like Pig, you can rejoice. And now in its place, we have Lord of the Wastes, who was a crit chance build. One thing to note about the Lord of the Wastes is that they have the Pendulum, which is an obscenely powerful item. If you can get this to Diamond tier, you're going to be charging your items up a lot. This could lead to a little more frequency of like some crazy high roll builds in the later parts of the game that if they get the Pendulum, just go off way more than the other builds. So I don't know that that's going to come up too much, but I think that going for Lord of the Wastes feels pretty good. Otherwise, you'd go for Trash Titan if you had a large item. You'd go for Boss Hero if you had weapons. Hulking Experiment if you had potions. Master Alchemist to some degree if you had potions or ammo items. But generally, you were wanting to go for Trash Titan so that you could get the Juggler skill, or Property Baron so that you could get a property. But yeah, those are kind of the big ones here. Again, we can look at how these have all changed and we can look at the different numbers of that, but I'll leave that up to you. Not too much overall. I'd say a lot of the monsters have been buffed in some ways, some have been nerfed, but yeah, we'll leave that up to you to explore. Let's get into the Dooley items here. So, big one, duct tape is back. It is still that same item now in the latest iteration, which only gives you 1 trigger of shielding, but that's still very strong on Dooley if you're going for like a shield core build. Yeah, Dooley gets duct tape back. We can all rejoice. We all love duct tape. Long live the duct tape. Forklift, an item that I don't think anyone really used, but now is kind of looking kind of viable here. So it now is a 10-second cooldown item. It deals 100 damage, but now it says when you use an adjacent item, charge this 1.5, or 2 seconds, depending on its tier. It also says if you have another tool, apparel, tech, weapon, or friend, this gains plus 50, 100, and 150 damage. I think that this item could be pretty real. It makes me think of like a Beast of Burden that is better. Beast of Burden has multicast for every type that you have, and you can get it to like plus 10 or 11 multicast. But honestly, Forklift, let's see, if we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 5 different items at silver tier, we can have this thing doing 350 damage in every, let's say, like 6 seconds. That's pretty good. That's very good, I would even venture to say. Additionally, scaling it into the later tiers here, I mean, if we can get this doing 850 damage on an even lower cooldown, a diamond tier, that's pretty good too. So yeah, I think this forklift could be like a very real build around item. Cool to have another one for Dooley, just another playstyle. I think Dooley right now is actually, with the friends nerf to all the bugs friends build, in like a pretty cool spot. There is more diversity in the builds in Dooley than I originally thought, and the more that I play Dooley, the more fun I'm having, just because there's more cool synergies. So another cool one here with the forklift. Pretty excited about that. Back to the patch notes, we can see that a couple of tech items have been buffed and changed. Power Sander no longer gives shielding and damage. Now it hastes an item. It also slows an item to the left of this, but we can pretty easily negate that. Additionally, the one big one here is Robotics Factory. So it got nerfed in last patch, where at gold it was doing that +1 multicast for your items, but they had a +2 second cooldown, and then at diamond they had a +1 second cooldown. So they've gotten rid of all that. Now it's back to the original item, but it can only be at diamond tier. So you can only find this at diamond tier, but it has that original +1 multicast without a cooldown amplifier to your friends. That feels really good. I think that before, in the late game, you generally didn't want to play the Robotics Factory after it got nerfed, just because in the late game you need to go off as fast as possible. And thus now, if you find the diamond tier Robotics Factory, you can play it and feel pretty good about it. So that's pretty nice. Also, virus has been changed here, so it poisons yourself. So this could be an item we want to find on Mak. And it also transforms another non-legendary small item on each player's board into a virus for the rest of the fight. So for us, we can negate that by having all medium or large items outside of that. That's pretty cool. It reminds me of the harpoon, which destroys one small item at a 9, 8, 7, or 6 second cooldown. And this item was honestly like pretty decent. It generally was not too playable, but the interesting thing about it is that it was still kind of like an arguable effect that you could try and justify on your board if you had nothing else to do, but it was hard to justify, but it could still be very powerful. Some builds really rely on a couple different small items. But for the virus, it itself has a 6 second cooldown. So it's way faster than the harpoon. It's also dealing damage to our opponents, and it doesn't have ammo. So it's like a way better harpoon in some ways, that we can just negate the harmful effect for ourselves. Yes, it is poisoning us, but I'm gonna be honest, like, poisoning, you just play this at bronze tier, you never level it up, and that one poison that you deal to yourself is just not going to matter. And if we have any way to reduce the cooldown of this virus, again, 6 seconds is like kind of fast for this effect. We can even think of something like, I don't know, Dinosaur, which is destroying an item at 9 seconds. Yeah, this virus could be pretty good. Just basically destroying all our opponents' small items. I think that's really cool. Anyway, that is the majority of the Dooley changes here. There's also a new item with the hologram projector. It says at the start of the fight, you transform this to a gold or diamond copy of another small item you have for the fight. We can pull that up. Hopefully that's in here. The hologram projector. It's a small item, and it immediately does it at the start of the fight, which feels pretty good. We can think of something like a 3D printer, which has, I think, like a 4 to 6 second cooldown before you can actually get it to transform into something. But yeah, this just immediately does it. Feels pretty nice. Mak has a similar item, but this is the strongest iteration of that sort of effect that we've seen on any of our heroes. So pretty cool Dooley item. And if we are utilizing that with like only one small other item, then we can guarantee some pretty crazy synergies. I just think of something like, I don't know, a metronome. We just know that we're going to have 2 metronomes essentially. That's pretty strong. Yeah, those are the overview of the new Dooley items and Dooley changes. Overall, I think that this is some buffs to Dooley, which feels pretty good. I think that the changes to the tech items that we see here are pretty much buffs across the board. And yeah, feels pretty nice. It's buffs in a way that doesn't break the character. I think the character is like in a pretty good balance spot after they nerfed the bugs build, so I'm pretty excited to see what we can pull off in this patch with Dooley. Let's move on now to Pygmalien. So, not gonna lie, there's a lot of nerfs in here, but I think overall that with the change to how healing works, that is a pretty big buff to Pygmalien. So, the Beehive. This has been changed and it's been nerfed. Now gets 5 less damage every time we buy a property. Beehive players, unfortunately, were nerfed, but hey, it's not that big of a nerf, which is pretty nice. Bushel. This is a really big change. So Bushel, when I was thinking about heal items, I'm like, cool, Bushel was also like a really reasonable item to play in your early game just because it did so much healing and it went off pretty quickly. Doesn't heal anymore. Now it just gains you regeneration. So again, I think that this is kind of like a direct response to that heal buff, but we can see here it still has that shield clause. It's still going to charge every time we shield. It's still on a 4-second cooldown, but it's going to give us regen. Frankly, I think this item is way worse now. I don't think you ever really wanted to get your Bushel to diamond here before, but that's really the only place where I saw it being super effective. Bronze tier Bushel feels really bad, and before where bronze tier Bushel felt really good because you were healing, I think for 40 or 60, I want to say. I think it was 40. In the early game, that felt really nice. It's kind of a nice enabler with your shield builds. Gaining 3 regeneration in the early game is not as impactful by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, maybe it is the case where regeneration, you're just stacking up so much of it that it is potent. But the thing again is like, if we know now that healing is going to be really good against poison and burn builds, we want to do healing, not regeneration. But yeah, I'm willing to see if this item turns out to be very strong and has any crazy enablers. I think on Mak, this could be pretty interesting. Mind you, Mak has no shield items, so I don't know. But it is a 4-second regen item. If you find it in like Pearl's dig site, that's not bad at all. But yeah, overall, disappointed to see that. But I think that if we're trying to balance Pig, knowing that the defensive builds have become way better, then it makes sense that Bushel has to get nerfed. Moving forward here, we also see that Cold Room has been nerfed. So interesting function. If we go to howbazaar.gg, we can click this little icon up here that has that May 7th on it. And then this is going to be basically all the things that were changed. We can go ahead and type in Cold Room. And basically the top line of text, that kind of like darker or grayed out text, less saturated text, I'll say, is going to be the text of where it was before, and now the brighter text is what it is now. So it now has a higher cooldown, which doesn't feel good. Mind you, this item was kind of like a must buy for your freeze builds, but 2 seconds may not matter too much in the long run. I think this item is still very good, especially if we are continuing to use the freeze builds, which the freeze builds haven't really been touched in this new patch. And I think that was the freeze build was maybe the most important and most potent builds that we had on Pygmalien in the last patch. So makes sense that Cold Room took a little bit of a nerf, but it's not so much that I think that this just makes the archetype unplayable. Moving forward here, we also see that with our regeneration clauses, we're going to see more of those on Pygmalien. So we're going to see it on items like golf clubs that say when you heal or gain regeneration, this is going to gain more damage for the fight. And we'll see that there's just more items on Pygmalien that give you regeneration now, which is pretty nice. Kukri has gotten the same treatment. Hogwash is now also going to trigger and give you regeneration, which is pretty nice. Additionally here, items like luxury tents, they look at heal and regeneration items, so that's pretty cool. Luxury tents before didn't feel so good because you didn't want to go into a heal build, but if you had an item that did specifically do healing, that was like a healing weapon or something like that, or restorative weapon, that felt really good. But now there's more items that we can use with luxury tents, so that feels really good. Ledger, unfortunately, has received another nerf. I struggle to see this item as being nearly as playable as it was before. Just pulling up numbers here, it used to have 4, 8, 12. That was already after a nerf, and now we're at 3, 5, 7. So this really hurts at diamond tier, where if you could get it to diamond before, that felt really good, but at diamond tier, it's not even as good as it was at gold tier before. That's a pretty hard one to see for Pygmalion enjoyers like myself. The ledger was a tremendous way to value stack our items before. Now it's not going to be as effective. It's unfortunate, but if Pygmalion overall, which is getting stronger, which I think he is, then it makes sense that we're going to have to see some nerfs to compensate. Additionally here, you can also see again more regeneration tags here. This is a pretty big one. Luxury QoS has also been nerfed, so you're going to gain less value from it when you sell off your properties. So you can actually go and look at that here. So it is going to now gain 3, 5, 7, 9 value compared to 3, 6, 9, 12 before. It's only a little bit still the same at bronze tier, but you generally wanted to start value stacking it when you went to silver tier anyway. Regardless, that is not the one that hurts the most. I think the one that hurts the most here is that it now has an 8-second cooldown instead of a 7-second cooldown. This item was already pretty slow, to be honest, and now seeing that it is even slower doesn't feel good. I think that was kind of like the one weakness of the QoS, is that it was pretty easy to value stack before, and there were some good Pygmalion skills that incentivized you to buy properties. Thinking about ones that give you like chocolate bars and stuff like that. But now it's going off a little bit slower, which doesn't feel good. I think that ultimately this item is still going to be strong, and it's still going to be one that you could effectively value stack. It's just going to be a little bit weaker. But one buff to Pygmalion, the money tree. So this item has been changed, and I think it's going to be most effective if we look at what it was before. So now it has a 3-second cooldown, which for a large property item on Pygmalion that is a value stack item, to have a 3-second cooldown is very potent. It's very powerful. Generally before we look at something like a fixer-upper that has a 4-second cooldown, and we already liked that before. This has an even lower cooldown, so that feels great. Now it equals equal to double its value. So it's doubly as effective, which again, healing just got way better, and it's on 3-second cooldown. That's really good. It also says when you level up and at the start of each day, get a spare change. That's very nice. That actually makes the money tree a little bit more of a value play, and it makes it way more potent than a fixer-upper in the early game. A fixer-upper, yes, it's upgrading much quicker than the money tree, just because it naturally is upgrading itself, but with our money tree, we're actually gaining money back. And that was kind of one of the problems with your fixer-upper builds, is you put all of your value stacking into the fixer-upper, but you never wanted to sell it. So sometimes you get into these positions where you just have this fixer-upper that holds so much value, but you are really poor, you don't have a lot of money. Now the money tree is a nice supplement to that, or a nice replacement to that, in that you can give it, or you can get double the amount of value from it. Before you leveled up and got a spare change, and now you gain another spare change at the start of each day, so that feels really good. But this also means that this clause down here that says when you sell a spare change, this gains more value, feels really good, and that clause has been buffed. So money tree is looking really good right now. I'm definitely going to be trying it in my Pygmalion games. Super excited to see this item be worthwhile, especially again, heal seems good, so having a good heal item feels very important and good for us. There's some other changes here overall. I think Pig Gym, you can see here, Pig's Gym has been buffed. This is a pretty nice one. It says when you buy a weapon, this gains 369 value compared to 123 before. That was really the big problem with Pig's Gym, is like you just were not putting enough damage from this thing to make it feel very good on your board. You generally wanted to play with like an Atlatl or a Yo-Yo, and yeah, you just had to do a lot of work to make this Pig's Gym seem worth it. Now you have to do way less. I mean, just getting this thing to gold tier, or even buying this in the early game, now this makes a lot more sense. Yeah, Pig's Gym feels very good. I think that this is going to be a really nice item. Thinking about it, like how the Kiosk before, when you sold a property, it got like 1, 2, 3, 4 value. And then when they changed it to gain way more value, the Kiosk suddenly became way more viable. So I think the Pig's Gym just got way more viable. Feels really good. And overall here, the last one I want to talk about is the Uwashawali bird. It has basically got double the effectiveness, but it also has gotten regeneration tied to it. And the Uwashawali bird before could be very potent, but again, now if we get like a 3 or 4 times multicast Uwashawali bird, let's say it's 4 times multicast, that means every time it goes off, we're reducing the burn and poison on us by 40%. So that's pretty crazy. And yeah, ultimately, I think that that's really cool. Vineyard as well. I want to check out Vineyard. I actually didn't prepare that one for my notes here, but I want to look at it here. So instead of having when you sell 10 items, give this 5, 10, 15 value, you have that same clause and it gains a truffle. And it has this clause here that says you have plus regen equal to this item's value. So that's pretty nice, actually. Wow. That makes way more sense, as well as why the ledger has been nerfed. But we also got some value increasing items, so really cool to see another healing item and defensive build be very potent. So yeah. Okay, I thought Pygmalien was getting some nerfs, but looks like he's getting some buffs, man. Looks like he's getting some buffs. Anyway, let's keep moving. Mak items. So I like this one. The apothecary only spawns reagents now. Before, it could sometimes spawn catalysts, so now you know exactly what you're getting when the apothecary, when you pick it up, which feels good on Mak, so that you can kind of plan your build around having the exact number of reagent generators and the exact number of catalyst generators to ensure that you're getting maximum value. The other big one here is Boiling Flask. So Boiling Flask now has been reverted compared to where it was before. It got nerfed. You can see Boiling Flask used to have an 8-second cooldown, and then it had that adjacent potions have their cooldowns increased by 2 and 1 second, depending on its tier. We got rid of all that. Now it's back to where it was before, where it says cooldown of 10 and 9 seconds, and then it has adjacent potions have +1 multicast. So I like the Boiling Flask before. I thought it was still potent even when you had that cooldown increase. Not as potent as it was before, obviously, but this makes like your Vat of Acid builds strong again. Not as strong as like the other Mak items, but I should say more viable, because you give your Vat of Acid a potion clause, and thus it has 2 times multicast, so that feels pretty good. Yeah, I like this change overall. It felt like, and I've seen this from some other people as well, who've said basically like the potions build just got nerfed into the ground and it was kind of unplayable, which I don't feel like was exactly the case, but it definitely did not feel anywhere near as good as it did when the patch first officially dropped with all these new items. The other big piece here on Mak is that your Calcinator, Retort, and Philosopher's Stone now have better numbers on their scaling, so we can look at that here. Calcinator used to get 2, 4, 6, 8 burn when you transformed reagent. Now it gains 3, 5, 7, 9 burn. So a little bit of a numbers buff for the Calcinator, Retort, and Philosopher's Stone. That all feels really good. Especially thinking about like at a bronze tier, Philosopher's Stone gaining 1 regeneration before never felt really good. Well, let's see if I'm lying to you. Yeah, got 1 at bronze. So this feels pretty nice. Makes your reagent transformation builds feel a little bit better, and I think that this was a little too nerfed before, like very slightly, and now with this slight buff, I think that may make up the difference, but we'll see. Okay, so moving forward here, Vanessa items. So we have 2 new items for Vanessa, which are the custom scope and Tortuga. Let's just go ahead and pull those up. So custom scope says the weapon to the right of this has 15, 20, 25% crit chance. It also says if you have exactly 1 weapon, when you crit with it, charge a non-weapon item for 1, 1.5, or 2 seconds. That's a really cool item. I don't think that 1 weapon Vanessa builds were good in the last patch. When the Dooley Friends build got nerfed, it was better, but then you still had the max slow builds, and then every character essentially had a viable freeze build, so it meant that 1 weapons were very risky. However, this custom scope does do a lot of good things for us. It also notably, this clause here that says the weapon to the right of this has that plus 15, 20, 25% crit chance is very good. Also notably here, if you have exactly 1 weapon, that clause itself means that the custom scope doesn't have to be next to your weapon to gain this charging benefit of a non-weapon on your board. The reason why this being on the right hand side can be very good is because we pair it with a silencer. The silencer is going to be the natural 1, 2, 3 combo that goes with the custom scope. We're kind of like building a sniper rifle, as it seems here, where this says the weapon to the left of this has that increased damage. Notably, this custom scope is in contention with the Shadowed Cloak now. Shadowed Cloak, which says it has to be on the right side of an item. So I think realistically, like if you had the option between the custom scope and the Shadowed Cloak, you'd probably just do the Shadowed Cloak, but I could see some builds that would really prefer to have the custom scope. I'm thinking of ones that are using like Vanessa's, or no, it's Captain's Quarters, which are kind of like a great enabler for a 1 weapon build. You pair the Captain's Quarters with a Captain's Wheel, that feels really good. So if you have like a high crit chance katana, or what I really want to put this next to is like a cutlass, because it deals double crit damage. Let me clarify there. I want to put a custom scope next to a cutlass, not necessarily the Captain's Quarters. If you have a cutlass, you're getting more crit chance on it. That feels really good. And then the cutlass is going off, and then it's charging the item that may be hasting your cutlass. That could feel really good. Ultimately, I think the custom scope, it's nice to have because with Vanessa having so many items, it means that your 1 weapon builds gain a little more consistency compared to where they were before. And ultimately, if you're gaining more consistency, that means that they're a little more powerful. It's not the strongest 1 weapon item that there is, but I do think that it is still a nice one to add to the collection of 1 weapon items for Vanessa. Now let's look at that other new item here, Tortuga. So this is, starting at silver tier, a large aquatic friend vehicle. These are all very important tags to know. It is inherently at silver tier 12, 2nd cooldown item that deals 300 damage, and it says haste your other items for 1 second. Is that really what this does? Wow, I think that's changed from when I first saw it. Interesting. Okay. Regardless of all that, it hastes your other items for 1 second, and it says when you use another friend, charge this 2 seconds. Also, when it scales up to higher tiers, it does way more damage. So this falls into the kind of like late game payoff late game payoff large items for Vanessa. We actually see a lot of these now. So we have the Slumbering Primordial. That was another late game payoff item for Vanessa, where we convert our poison, freeze, or burn builds into this great damage dealer. We also saw like the Sea Dog Saloon, which was another large item that worked really well with our friends. We saw Shipwreck, which gives our, now again, our aquatic items have +1 multicast, as we'll see. This has been reverted, hooray. yeah, this Tortuga now is yet another item here that I think is going to be another pretty potent large item. I think Vanessa now kind of has like a glut of large items that now make your builds more viable in the late game. I don't know that that's really a problem. I think that's just kind of like a playstyle of the hero. Generally speaking, what I see happen in a lot of Vanessa games is you have like a pretty decent and I should say like powerful mid game board that starts to fall off when you get into like day 8, 9, and 10, and you kind of need something to help you gain a little bit more of an advantage in the later portions of the game to finish out that 10 win. And Tortuga is another item that'll do that. So that feels pretty good. I think the fact that when you're using another friend, you charge us 2 seconds means that this thing is going to be like a machine gun. It's pretty crazy. Um, Especially if you have a friend's build that generally the friend's builds also cared about haste. So this haste clause is actually like pretty insane. Thinking about something like a shark ray, thinking about something like the old salt claw. Yeah, hasting your other items for 1 second, even it at 1 second, that's huge. That's really, really potent. So I think Tortuga is going to be very strong. Again, it falls into the kind of large tier Vanessa late game finisher item pool that we have, but I don't know. Seems like a pretty fun item. I think it's going to be really strong and one that you're definitely going to want to look out for in your friends' runs. Okay, let's keep going here. So I'll just jump to Shipwreck. So yeah, Shipwreck. Now it's back to where it was before. Minus you can't get it at gold tier. It has to only be at diamond tier. But when you do get it, it's going to feel really good. It just is what it was before, minus I guess the crit chance part of it. It used to also give your items crit chance. But now just your aquatic items have +1 multicast. Feels pretty good. I think that we're going to be very happy about that. Elemental depth charge now is going to freeze for 0.5 seconds less. I think that this is pretty strong. Let me just confirm that as well. Elemental depth charge, yeah. Used to freeze a smaller medium item for 1 second. Now it's only for 0.5. That does matter. From this elemental depth charge before was very good, and now having this clause on it where it is a little less effective means that it is a little less effective overall, and I think that's okay. Generally, when you're burning and poisoning so much with it, that was kind of the big draw to the item to begin with, although that freeze trigger could be very powerful with something like a Yeti crab. Regardless, the freeze hasn't been taken off of it, so you're still getting your Yeti crab trigger. Other pieces here, the mantis shrimp now is getting more burn, which feels pretty nice. Rejoice, my piranha companions. They are now our friends. We have wooed them in with our charming friendship. And now they are our friends. So rejoice, we have more friends to join us here in the piranhas. That's actually kind of important because now that'll synergize with all of these items that care about having friends. And I think that this change was kind of a long time coming in that we're gaining more items that care about having friends. Piranhas didn't really synergize with any of them. It was an aquatic item, but having this friend type feels pretty good, and I think that'll be pretty important because there's a lot of ways for us to gain piranhas in the game, thinking about chum, thinking about the fishing net. So we're going to get a lot of piranhas. They're our friends, and that's going to matter a lot for items again like Tortuga, Sea Dog, Saloon, and any items that care about friends. Moving forward here, this is I think the one that a lot of us are going to be interested in. Shark Claws. Shark Claws has been nerfed. It says change, or it's changed rather to your weapons. Your other weapons gain 10, 20, 30, 40 damage for the fight. So we can look at that here. The nerf to it is just that it says your other weapons instead of your weapons. So Shark Claws is not giving itself the damage. Honestly, I don't think that was what the problem was before the item, and I do strongly, in very distinctly, I should say, choose the word problem. Giving your other items this much damage in the early game on this low of a cooldown, and we can see here it's on a 5-second cooldown on Vanessa, meant that if you saw Shark Claws, you take it. It's going to be the best stats value on your board compared to any other item that you can buy at that same tier. At bronze, you're always buying shark claws. You buy a couple weapons, great. You're gonna probably win the next 4 days, guaranteed. It's just such a potent item. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know that this nerf is really fixing that problem. I think it's in the right direction. I see that they generally don't want to steer very far away from the damage numbers being at intervals of 5 and 10. That being said, I think if we reduce the damage by like 2, 3, or 4, that could be just enough to balance it, but then you start breaking the other balancing and how everything is balanced in the game, so I don't know. Ultimately here, I think shark claws were a little problematic before just because if you saw them, you had to take them. I mean, you didn't have to take them. Don't get me wrong, you can do whatever you want, but it generally was incorrect, in my opinion, to not take them if you were trying to get 10 wins on that run, and that is what I'm trying to do on most of my runs. It was kind of like a very conscious effort to not take them, or you had to have like a very specific aquatic build that was showing promise early on to where you wouldn't want shark claws, and then even again, shark claws are an aquatic item. So yeah, I think that this is a change in the right direction. I would have liked to see more. We didn't see more. That's okay. That's just my opinion on it. But I think that overall, we also see kind of buffs on other characters. Feels good. And it's not like playing Vanessa was a problem before. Vanessa was like a plague on the meta. It was just like, you're probably going to lose to a Vanessa if they had shark claws in the first 3 to 4 days, guaranteed. And then from there, you could regain some of your lost equity from your fights. Regardless, that's okay. I think Vanessa's still in a great spot. Seeing some of these nerfs and numbers changes are really good. I think Tortuga's going to be very strong, and yeah, overall, I think Vanessa was in a like really fun spot before too, regardless of the shark claws. So I think that continues to be the case where Vanessa is very fun in season 2. And okay, so rounding out the changes here in the patch, we see that Broken Shackles has been changed. Cosmic Plumage also maybe is kind of real. It wasn't so real before, but we can look at the item here. It basically is going to be shielding, putting way more damage onto our board, and when we crit, we're also going to be charging it by 3 seconds. It had a 7-second cooldown, so you could play this on your board. It's not inherent to any hero, so you'd have to find it specifically from the Cosmic Rock or from Pearl's Dig Site. Yeah, not a big change, but if you pick this up now, it's playable and not just an instant sell. Other things here, we have a couple new skills, which are pretty exciting. Alchemical Precision, so your potions have a reduced cooldown, feels pretty nice. We see some regen skills, which feel really good, so your herbal supplements, regen items have additional regeneration. Seems like they're trying to buff the regeneration archetype and items overall. We also see that there's a new skill here, Pop-Up Shop, which is pretty cool. It says your toys and apparel items have their cooldowns reduced by 5 and 10%. It's pretty nice. Vital Reserve, this is kind of like your left-handed, right-handed skill, your bronze to gold skills that, or bronze to diamond, I guess, realistically, but these kind of like bread and butter skills that amplify the one specific strategy that you're doing. So now you have the ability to buff up your regen items in the early game, which feels pretty nice. I will say that another one of these skills that can eat up the gold tier skill slot in the early game doesn't feel as good. I'm kind of the opinion that even after all these changes, regeneration still is one of the weaker strategies in the Bazaar, and thus if you're putting +2 for 6/8 regen on your board, I don't think that that's really enough to want to get that item. We may need to see like doubling of these numbers, honestly, for this to feel super good, but if you're going to a regen build, just more way to get regeneration, which is not a bad thing. But yes, this has been the Season 2 patch. Pretty cool. We see a lot of changes here. I think the core gameplay is going to be very similar to how it was before. That might be not the case as the patch plays out, But ultimately, I am curious to see kind of how these new items work and these new strategies work. I did like where the game was before. I was getting a little burnt out at the end of the season, but that's kind of to be expected when you put so much time in to one specific activity. Regardless, I'm liking the new patch. I do think that these new items are all looking really fun. I'll be putting out some videos here on the channel of these new items as they become available. And yeah, ultimately, very excited to see that the Bazaar is gaining some new things here. And probably will be picking up some interesting Pygmalien skins along the way. I like the Mule Pygmalien. It's been spoiled for a while, but I just love how he's holding the beast of burden there. It's all fun and cuddles. So good vibes, good vibes. But overall, I appreciate you all watching this video and joining me here. I am the Bazaar Whisperer. This has been yet another Bazaar Overexplained, and not even for engagement here, but obviously engagement is good. If you are seeing anything that is exciting you in this patch, I'd love to talk about it in the comments. I've been talking with some of you in the comments recently, and it's been really positive and fun interactions with all of y'all. So yeah, would love to see your guys' thoughts and chat about it a bit more with you guys. But with all that, I hope you all have a wonderful day or evening, and I'll see you in the next one.